Week 12. This week we're digging into The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman and The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. I saved these stories to the end. I'm not going to say much more than that because I want you to experience these stories. So I don't have a whole lot of other things to add, except as you listen, especially to The Yellow Wallpaper, to both, be listening for logos, pathos, and ethos. My suggestion, of course, is to have a paper copy. I've given you PDF copies. You can also pull it up on the internet, but to have a paper copy is an excellent way to begin. You can follow along with a pen or a pencil in your hand, highlight, underline, star things, write logos in the margin, write ethos in the margin, write pathos in the margin as you encounter those things in the stories. You might also listen to it fully one time through, then go back on your own and listen to it again or read it again. Now, we discussed, I think it was within the literary analysis section, that you should read the story multiple times. You should encounter it multiple times. So what we're doing right now is encountering The Yellow Wallpaper and The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. So I'm going to go ahead and get us going. Did not do that. There we go. Every time, I am consistent. We can say that. We can say, I am consistent. Okay. Let's just move right in here. The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman.
The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It is very seldom that mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral halls for the summer. A colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, I would say a haunted house, and reach the height of romantic felicity, but that would be asking too much of fate. Still, I will proudly declare that there is something queer about it. Else, why should it be let so cheaply? And why have stood so long untenanted? John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage. John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. John is a physician, and perhaps, I would not say it to a living soul, of course, but this is dead paper and a great relief to my mind, perhaps that is one reason I do not get well faster. You see, he does not believe I am sick. And what can one do? If a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? My brother is also a physician and also of high standing, and he says the same thing. So I take phosphates or phosphites, whichever it is, and tonics, and journeys, and air, and exercise, and am absolutely forbidden to work until I am well again. Personally, I disagree with their ideas. Personally, I believe that congenial work, with excitement and change, would do me good. But what is one to do? I did write for a while in spite of them, but it does exhaust me a good deal, having to be so sly about it or else meet with heavy opposition. I sometimes fancy that in my condition, if I had less opposition and more society and stimulus, but John says the very worst thing I can do is to think about my condition, and I confess, it always makes me feel bad. So I will let it alone and talk about the house. The most beautiful place. It is quite alone, standing well back from the road, quite 3 miles from the village.
Weird. Someone's trying to log into my Cash App.
I wouldn't worry about it. I'm sure it's nothing serious. Like identity theft. Just give me those numbers on your phone.
With Cash App, you'll be alerted if someone tries to log into your account. Because if it's weird for real, it's weird for real.
It makes me think of English places that you read about, for there are hedges and walls and gates that lock, and lots of separate little houses for the gardeners and people. There is a delicious garden. I never saw such a garden, large and shady, full of box-bordered paths, and lined with long grape-covered arbours with seats under them. There were greenhouses too, but they are all broken now. There was some legal trouble, I believe, something about the heirs and co-heirs. Anyhow, the place has been empty for years. That spoils my ghostliness, I am afraid, but I don't care. There is something strange about the house. I can feel it. I even said so to John one moonlight evening, but he said what I felt was a draught, and shut the window. I get unreasonably angry with John sometimes. I'm sure I never used to be so sensitive. I think it is due to this nervous condition. But John says if I feel so, I shall neglect proper self-control, so I take pains to control myself, before him at least, and that makes me very tired. I don't like our rooms a bit. I wanted one downstairs that opened on the piazza and had roses all over the window, and such pretty old-fashioned chintz hangings, but John would not hear of it. He said there was only one window and not room for 2 beds, and no near room for him if he took another. He is very careful and loving, and hardly lets me stir without special direction. I have a schedule prescription for each hour in the day. He takes all care from me, and so I feel basely ungrateful not to value it more. He said we came here solely on my account, that I was to have perfect rest and all the air I could get. Your exercise depends on your strength, my dear, said he, and your food somewhat on your appetite, but air you can absorb all the time. So we took the nursery at the top of the house. It is a big airy room, the whole floor nearly, with windows that look all ways, and air and sunshine galore. It was a nursery first, and then playroom and gymnasium, I should judge, for the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls. The paint and paper look as if a boys' school had used it. It is stripped off, the paper, in great patches all around the head of my bed, about as far as I can reach, and in a great place on the other side of the room low down. I never saw a worse paper in my life.
Oh, hey, I found this Cash App card on the...
One of those sprawling flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. It is dull enough to confuse the eye in following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study, and when you follow the lame uncertain curves for a little distance, they suddenly commit suicide, plunge off at outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard of contradictions. The colour is repellent, almost revolting, a smouldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow-turning sunlight. It is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulphur tint in others. No wonder the children hated it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. There comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. We have been here 2 weeks, and I haven't felt like writing before, since that first day. I am sitting by the window now, up in this atrocious nursery, and there is nothing to hinder my writing as much as I please, save lack of strength. John is away all day, and even some nights when his cases are serious. I am glad my case is not serious. But these nervous troubles are dreadfully depressing. John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. Of course, it is only nervousness. It does weigh on me so not to do my duty in any way. I meant to be such a help to John, such a real rest and comfort, and here I am, a comparative burden already. Nobody would believe what an effort it is to do what little I am able, to dress and entertain and order things. It is fortunate Mary is so good with the baby. Such a dear baby. And yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous. I suppose John never was nervous in his life. He laughs at me so about this wallpaper. At first he meant to repaper the room, But afterwards he said that I was letting it get the better of me, and that nothing was worse for a nervous patient than to give way to such fancies. He said that after the wallpaper was changed, it would be the heavy bedstead, and then the barred windows, and then that gate at the head of the stairs, and so on. You know, the place is doing you good, he said. And really, dear, I don't care to renovate the house just for a 3 months' rental. Then do let us go downstairs, I said. There are such pretty rooms there. Then he took me in his arms and called me a blessed little goose, and said he would go down to the cellar, if I wished, and have it whitewashed into the bargain. But he is right enough about the beds and windows and things. It is an airy and comfortable room, as anyone need wish, and, of course, I would not be so silly as to make him uncomfortable just for a whim. I'm really getting quite fond of the big room, all but that horrid paper. Out of one window I can see the garden, those mysterious deep-shaded arbours, the riotous old-fashioned flowers, and bushes and gnarly trees. Out of another I get a lovely view of the bay and a little private wharf belonging to the estate. There is a beautiful shaded lane that runs down there from the house. I always fancy I see people walking in these numerous paths and arbours, but John has cautioned me not to give way to fancy in the least. He says that with my imaginative power and habit of story-making, a nervous weakness like mine is sure to lead to all manner of excited fancies, and that I ought to use my will and good sense to check the tendency. So I try. But I find I get pretty tired when I try. It is so discouraging not to have any advice and companionship about my work. When I get really well, John says we will ask Cousin Henry and Julia down for a long visit. But he says he would as soon put fireworks in my pillowcase as to let me have those stimulating people about now. I wish I could get well faster, but I must not think about that. This paper looks to me as if it knew what a vicious influence it had. There is a recurrent spot where the pattern lolls like a broken neck and 2 bulbous eyes stare at you upside down. I get positively angry with the impertinence of it and the everlastingness. Up and down and sideways they crawl, and those absurd unblinking eyes are everywhere. There is one place where 2 breadths didn't match, and the eyes go all up and down the line, one a little higher than the other. I never saw so much expression in an inanimate thing before, and we all know how much expression they have. I used to lie awake as a child and get more entertainment and terror out of blank walls and plain furniture than most children could find in a toy store. I remember what a kindly wink the knobs of our big old bureau used to have, and there was one chair that always seemed like a strong friend. I used to feel that if any of the other things looked too fierce, I could always hop into that chair and be safe. The furniture in this room is no worse than inharmonious, however, for we had to bring it all from downstairs. I suppose when this was used as a playroom they had to take the nursery things out, and no wonder. I never saw such ravages as the children have made here. The wallpaper, as I said before, is torn off in spots, and it sticketh closer than a brother. They must have had perseverance as well as hatred. Then the floor is scratched and gouged and splintered. The plaster itself is dug out here and there, and this great heavy bed, which is all we found in the room, looks as if it had been through the wars. But I don't mind it a bit, only the paper. There comes John's sister, such a dear girl as she is, and so careful of me. I must not let her find me writing. She is a perfect and enthusiastic housekeeper, and hopes for no better profession. I verily believe she thinks it is the writing which made me sick. But I can write when she is out, and see her a long way off from these windows. There is one that commands the road, a lovely shaded winding road, and one that just looks off over the country. A lovely country too, full of great elms and velvet meadows. This wallpaper has a kind of sub-pattern in a different shade, a particularly irritating one, for you can only see it in certain lights and not clearly then. But in the places where it isn't faded and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to skulk about behind that silly and conspicuous front design. There's Sister on the stairs.
Oh, hey, I found this cash.
Well, the 4th of July is over. The people are gone and I'm tired out. John thought it might do me good to see a little company, so we just had Mother and Nellie and the children down for a week. Of course, I didn't do a thing. Jenny sees to everything now. But it tired me all the same. John says if I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Weir Mitchell in the fall. But I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she says he is just like John and my brother, only more so. Besides, it is such an undertaking to go so far. I don't feel as if it was worthwhile to turn my hand over for anything, and I'm getting dreadfully fretful and careless. I cry at nothing, and cry most of the time. Of course, I don't when John is here, or anybody else, but when I am alone. And I am alone a good deal just now. John is kept in town very often by serious cases, and Jenny is good and lets me alone when I want her to. So I walk a little in the garden or down that lovely lane, sit on the porch under the roses, and lie down up here a good deal. I'm getting really fond of the room in spite of the wallpaper. Perhaps because of the wallpaper. It dwells in my mind so. I lie here on this great immovable bed. It is nailed down, I believe, and follow that pattern about by the hour. It is as good as gymnastics, I assure you. I start, we'll say, at the bottom, down in the corner over there where it has not been touched, and I determine for the 1000th time that I will follow that pointless pattern to some sort of conclusion. I know a little of the principle of design, and I know this thing was not arranged on any laws of radiation or alternation or repetition or symmetry or anything else that I ever heard of. It is repeated, of course, by the breaths, but not otherwise. Looked at in one way, each breath stands alone. The bloated curves and flourishes, a kind of debased Romanesque with delirium tremens, go waddling up and down in isolated columns of fatuity. But, on the other hand, they connect diagonally, and the sprawling outlines run off in great slanting waves of optic horror, like a lot of wallowing seaweeds in full chase. The whole thing goes horizontally too, at least it seems to, and I exhaust myself in trying to distinguish the order of its going in that direction. They have used a horizontal breath for a frieze, and that adds wonderfully to the confusion. There is one end of the room where it is almost intact, and there, when the cross lights fade and the low sun shines directly upon it, I can almost fancy radiation after all. The interminable grotesques seem to form around a common centre and rush off in headlong plunges of equal distraction. It makes me tired to follow it. I will take a nap, I guess. I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to. I don't feel able. And I know John would think it absurd. But I must say what I feel and think in some way. It is such a relief. But the effort is getting to be greater than the relief. Half the time now I am awfully lazy and lie down ever so much. John says I mustn't lose my strength, and has me take cod liver oil and lots of tonics and things, to say nothing of ale and wine and rare meat. Dear John, he loves me very dearly and hates to have me sick. I tried to have a real earnest, reasonable talk with him the other day and tell him how I wish he would let me go and make a visit to Cousin Henry and Julia. But he said I wasn't able to go, nor able to stand it, after I got there, and I did not make out a very good case for myself, for I was crying before I had finished. It is getting to be a great effort for me to think straight. Just this nervous weakness, I suppose. And dear John gathered me up in his arms and just carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed and sat by me and read to me till it tired my head. He said that I was his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake and keep well. He says no one but myself can help me out of it, that I must use my will and self-control and not let any silly fancies run away with me. There's one comfort, the baby is well and happy and does not have to occupy this nursery with the horrid wallpaper. If we had not used it, that blessed child would have. What a fortunate escape! Why, I wouldn't have a child of mine, an impressionable little thing, live in such a room for worlds. I never thought of it before, but it is lucky that John kept me here after all. I can stand it so much easier than a baby, you see. Of course, I never mention it to them anymore. I'm too wise, but I keep watch of it all the same. There are things in that paper that nobody knows but me, or ever will. Behind that outside pattern, the dim shapes get clearer every day. It is always the same shape, only very numerous. And it is like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. I don't like it a bit. I begin to think, I wish John would take me away from here. It is so hard to talk with John about my case because he is so wise and because he loves me so. But I tried it last night. It was moonlight. The moon shines in all around just as the sun does.
Oh, hey, I found this Cash App.
I hate to see it sometimes. It creeps so slowly and always comes in by one window or another. John was asleep, and I hated to waken him, so I kept still and watched the moonlight on that undulating wallpaper till I felt creepy. The faint figure behind seemed to shake the pattern, just as if she wanted to get out. I got up softly and went to feel and see if the paper did move, and when I came back John was awake. "What is it, little girl?" he said. "Don't go walking about like that. You'll get cold." I thought it was a good time to talk, so I told him that I really was not gaining here, and that I wished he would take me away. "Why, darling," said he, "our lease will be up in 3 weeks, and I can't see how to leave before. The repairs are not done at home, and I cannot possibly leave town just now. Of course, if you were in any danger, I could and would, but you really are better, dear, whether you can see it or not. I'm a doctor, dear, and I know. You are gaining flesh and colour. Your appetite is better. I feel really much easier about you. I don't weigh a bit more," said I, "nor as much. And my appetite may be better in the evening when you are here, but it is worse in the morning when you are away." "Bless her little heart," said he with a big hug. "She shall be as sick as she pleases. But now let's improve the shining hours by going to sleep, and talk about it in the morning." "And you won't go away?" I asked gloomily. "Why, how can I, dear? It is only 3 weeks more, and then we will take a nice little trip of a few days while Jenny is getting the house ready. Really, dear, you are better." "Better in body, perhaps," I began, and stopped short, for he sat up straight and looked at me with such a stern, reproachful look that I could not say another word. "My darling," said he, "I beg of you, for my sake, and for our child's sake, as well as for your own, that you will never for one instant let that idea enter your mind. There is nothing so dangerous, so fascinating, to a temperament like yours. It is a false and foolish fancy. Can you not trust me as a physician when I tell you so?" So, of course, I said no more on that score, and we went to sleep before long. He thought I was asleep first, but I wasn't, and lay there for hours trying to decide whether that front pattern and the back pattern really did move together or separately. On a pattern like this, by daylight, there is a lack of sequence, a defiance of law, that is a constant irritant to a normal mind. The colour is hideous enough, and unreliable enough, and infuriating enough, but the pattern is torturing. You think you have mastered it, but just as you get well underway in following, it turns a back somersault, and there you are. It slaps you in the face, knocks you down, and tramples upon you. It is like a bad dream. The outside pattern is a florid arabesque, reminding one of a fungus. If you can imagine a toadstool in joints, an interminable stream of toadstools budding and sprouting in endless convolutions, why, that is something like it. That is, sometimes. There is one marked peculiarity about this paper, a thing nobody seems to notice but myself, and that is that it changes as the light changes. When the sun shoots in through the east window, I always watch for that first long, straight ray. It changes so quickly that I never can quite believe it. That is why I watch it always. By moonlight, the moon shines in all night when there is a moon, I wouldn't know it was the same paper. At night, in any kind of light, in twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all by moonlight, it becomes bars. The outside pattern, I mean, and the woman behind it is as plain as can be. I didn't realize for a long time what the thing was that showed behind that dim sub-pattern, but now I am quite sure it is a woman. By daylight she is subdued, quiet. I fancy it is the pattern that keeps her so still. It is so puzzling. It keeps me quiet by the hour. I lie down ever so much now. John says it is good for me and to sleep all I can. Indeed, he started the habit by making me lie down for an hour after each meal. It is a very bad habit, I am convinced, for you see I don't sleep. And that cultivates deceit, for I don't tell them I'm awake. Oh no. The fact is, I am getting a little afraid of John. He seems very queer sometimes. And even Jenny has an inexplicable look. It strikes me occasionally, just as a scientific hypothesis, that perhaps it is the paper. I have watched John when he did not know I was looking, and come into the room suddenly on the most innocent excuses, and I've caught him several times looking at the paper. And Jenny too. I caught Jenny with her hand on it once. She didn't know I was in the room, and when I asked her in a very quiet voice, with the most restrained manner possible, what she was doing with the paper, she turned around as if she had been caught stealing, and looked quite angry, asked me why I should frighten her so. Then she said that the paper stained everything it touched, that she had found yellow smooches on all my clothes and John's, and she wished we would be more careful. Did that not sound innocent? But I know she was studying the pattern, and I am determined that nobody shall find it out but myself. Life is very much more exciting now than it used to be. You see, I have something more to expect, to look forward to watch. I really do eat better, and am more quiet than I was. John is so pleased to see me improve. He laughed a little the other day, and said I seemed to be flourishing, in spite of my wallpaper. I turned it off with a laugh. I had no intention of telling him it was because of the wallpaper. He would make fun of me. He might even want to take me away. I don't want to leave now until I have found it out. There is a week more, and I think that will be enough. I'm feeling ever so much better. I don't sleep much at night, for it is so interesting to watch developments, but I sleep a good deal in the daytime. In the daytime it is tiresome and perplexing. There are always new shoots on the fungus, and new shades of yellow all over it. I cannot keep count of them, though I have tried conscientiously. It is the strangest yellow, that wallpaper. It makes me think of all the yellow things I ever saw. Not beautiful ones like buttercups, but old, foul, bad yellow things. But there is something else about that paper. The smell. I noticed it the moment we came into the room, but with so much air and sun it was not bad. Now we have had a week of fog and rain, and whether the windows are open or not, the smell is here. It creeps all over the house. I find it hovering in the dining room, skulking in the parlour, hiding in the hall, lying in wait for me on the stairs. It gets into my hair. Even when I go to ride, if I turn my head suddenly and surprise it, there is that smell. Such a peculiar odour, too. I have spent hours in trying to analyse it, to find what it smelled like. It is not bad at first and very gentle, but quite the subtlest, most enduring odour I ever met. In this damp weather it is awful. I wake up in the night and find it hanging over me. It used to disturb me at first. I thought seriously of burning the house to reach the smell. But now I am quite used to it. The only thing I can think of that is like the colour of the paper, a yellow smell. There is a very funny mark on this wall, low down, near the mop board, a streak that runs around the room. It goes behind every piece of furniture except the bed, a long, straight, even smooch, as if it had been rubbed over and over. I wonder how it was done and who did it, and what they did it for. Round and round and round. Round and round and round. It makes me dizzy. I really have discovered something at last. Through watching, so much at night, when it changes so, I have finally found out. The front pattern does move, and no wonder. The woman behind shakes it. Sometimes I think there are a great many women behind, and sometimes only one, and she crawls around fast, and her crawling shakes it all over. Then, in the very bright spots, she keeps still. And in the very shady spots, she just takes a hold of the bars and shakes them hard. And she is all the time trying to climb through. But nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think that is why it has so many heads. They get through, and then the pattern strangles them off and turns them upside down and makes their eyes white. If those heads were covered or taken off, it would not be half so bad. I think that woman gets out in the daytime, and I'll tell you why, privately. I've seen her. I can see her out of every one of my windows. It is the same woman, I know, for she is always creeping, and most women do not creep by daylight. I see her on that long road under the trees, creeping along, and when a carriage comes, she hides under the blackberry vines. I don't blame her a bit. It must be very humiliating to be caught creeping by daylight. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. I can't do it at night, for I know John would suspect something at once. And John is so queer now, that I don't want to irritate him. I wish he would take another room. Besides, I don't want anybody to get that woman out at night but myself. I often wonder if I could see her out of all the windows at once. But turn as fast as I can only see out of one at a time. And though I always see her, she may be able to creep faster than I can turn. I have watched her sometimes away off in the open country, creeping as fast as a cloud shadow in a high wind. If only that top pattern could be gotten off from the under one. I mean to try it, little by little. I have found out another funny thing, but I shan't tell it this time. It does not do to trust people too much. There are only 2 more days to get this paper off, and I believe John is beginning to notice. I don't like the look in his eyes. And I heard him ask Jenny a lot of professional questions about me. She had a very good report to give. She said I slept a good deal in the daytime. John knows I don't sleep very well at night, for all I'm so quiet. He asked me all sorts of questions too, and pretended to be very loving and kind, as if I couldn't see through him. Still, I don't wonder he acts so, sleeping under this paper for 3 months. It only interests me, but I feel sure John and Jenny are secretly affected by it. Hurrah! This is the last day, but it is enough. John is to stay in town overnight, and won't be out until this evening. Jenny wanted to sleep with me, the sly thing, but I told her I should undoubtedly rest better for a night all alone. That was clever, for really I wasn't alone a bit. As soon as it was moonlight and that poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern, I got up and ran to help her. I pulled and she shook, I shook and she pulled, and before morning we had peeled off yards of that paper, a strip about as high as my head and half around the room. And then, when the sun came and that awful pattern began to laugh at me, I declared I would finish it today. We go away tomorrow, and they are moving all my furniture down again to leave things as they were before. Jenny looked at the wall in amazement, but I told her merrily that I did it out of pure spite at the vicious thing. She laughed and said she wouldn't mind doing it herself, but I must not get tired. How she betrayed herself that time. But I am here, and no person touches this paper but me, not alive. She tried to get me out of the room. It was too patent. But I said it was so quiet and empty and clean now that I believed I would lie down again and sleep all I could, and not to wake me even for dinner. I would call when I woke. So now she is gone, and the servants are gone, and the things are gone, and there is nothing left but that great bedstead nailed down with the canvas mattress we found on it. We shall sleep downstairs tonight and take the boat home tomorrow. I quite enjoy the room, now it is bare again. How those children did tear about here. This bedstead is fairly gnawed. But I must get to work. I have locked the door and thrown the key down into the front path. I don't want to go out, and I don't want to have anybody come in till John comes. I want to astonish him. I've got a rope up here that even Jenny did not find. If that woman does get out and tries to get away, I can tie her. But I forgot I could not reach far without anything to stand on. This bed will not move. I tried to lift and push it until I was lame, and then I got so angry I bit off a little piece at one corner, but it hurt my teeth. Then I peeled off all the paper I could reach standing on the floor. It sticks horribly and the pattern just enjoys it. All those strangled heads and bulbous eyes and waddling fungus growths just shriek with derision. I'm getting angry enough to do something desperate. To jump out of the window would be admirable exercise, but the bars are too strong even to try. Besides, I wouldn't do it. Of course not. I know well enough that a step like that is improper and might be misconstrued. I don't like to look out of the windows even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. I wonder if they all come out of that wallpaper, as I did. But I am securely fastened now by my well-hidden rope. You don't get me out in the road there. I suppose I shall have to get back behind the pattern when it comes night, and that is hard. It is so pleasant to be out in this great room and creep around as I please. I don't want to go outside. I won't, even if Jenny asks me to. For outside you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow. But here I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulder just fits in that long smooch around the wall, so I cannot lose my way. Why, there's John at the door. It is no use, young man, you can't open it. How he does call and pound. Now he's crying for an axe. It would be a shame to break down that beautiful door. John dear, said I in the gentlest voice, the key is down by the front steps, under a plantain leaf. That silenced him for a few moments. Then he said, very quietly indeed, open the door, my darling. I can't, said I. The key is down by the front door, under a plantain leaf. And then I said it again, several times, very gently and slowly, and said it so often that he had to go and see, and he got it, of course, and came in. He stopped short by the door. What is the matter? He cried. For God's sake, what are you doing? I kept on creeping just the same, but I looked at him over my shoulder. I've got out at last, said I, in spite of you and Jane. And I've pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back. Now, why should that man have fainted? But he did, and right across my path by the wall, so that I had to creep over him every time.
All right, there we have it. The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So the first question, what are your thoughts? What's your reaction? First time I ever read this, I was furious. I was like, why did you make us read this? The professor's first name was Francine, and I remember being upset at Francine. But I didn't understand it, not until I dug into it. Now I've read it so many times, I can say to you it's one of my favorite pieces of literature. I can read this over and over and over and over. To me, it's like listening to a favorite song. The language choices are so beautiful. Getting ahead of myself here, but that's my reaction now, as opposed to my reaction when I first read this story. Historical situational context of the short story. This is where things get interesting. This was written in 1892. It's a long time ago, right? Very long time ago. Except at the same time, when you think about it, it's really not that long ago. We're talking 100. Let's do the math. Let's do the actual math. And I have to write it down because I'm not any good with figures. I'm almost there. Some of you are already like, it's 133. Yes, it is. It is 133 years ago. At least that's the math that I did. That's really not that long ago, especially when you consider that it was just 133 years ago that when women were hysterical or depressed or suffering from some other mental disorder that didn't have a name, that the doctors of that day, specifically Silas Weir Mitchell, who she mentions in the story, they applied the rest cure. Oh, you're a hysterical woman. You just need to lay down. Don't write. Don't talk to people with intelligence. Don't do anything stimulating. Just rest, lay down, eat food. Then you'll feel better. How many of us can say that isolating ourselves, stuffing our faces, and having no contact with the outside world makes us feel better? Right, 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 right. But 130 years ago, that was the thought. Absolutely was the thought. Get you away from people, stuff you with food, make you rest and lay down, and then you'll get better. You might get a little bit more plump, but aside from that, I'm not sure. You might get some bed sores, muscle atrophy. Oh, 1892. So this is a similar time period to when Kate Chopin wrote The Story of an Hour. And what's interesting here is we've got two female authors in our She Said section who had drastic influence on the birth of the women's movement. Drastic influence. Charlotte Perkins Gilman and Kate Chopin, both with their writings, had a large influence on women beginning to be more than just stay-at-home wives and mothers. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those things. I was a stay-at-home wife and for years, for about 12, 13 years, and I have six biological children. So, I don't have any problem with that, but I also have a career that I love. That wasn't so much even an option in those days, 130 years ago. So some of us might be tempted to feel like, oh, that's so long ago. It doesn't have anything to do with life today. But in reality, when you think about it, it was just 130 years ago that women couldn't vote. It was less than that, actually. It was 104 years ago because it was right around 1920 that women got the right to vote. But these ladies, Charlotte and Kate, became voices for women in a time period where women were expected to shh, be quiet, just go about your duties. And we had a few of these ladies like these two going, no. So let's take a look here. What are three things? Events, ideas about the author's life that could have impacted the writing of this short story. Well, after I pop all these questions up on the screen here, we're going to look at Charlotte's life. I've got PowerPoint slides here in abundance regarding the life of Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So, of course, we're going to look at, after you just deep dive into Charlotte's life, you'll be able to answer question number 4. Number 5, literary elements. What literary elements did Charlotte intentionally use in this story? Right? What about the setting? What if she had been in a basement? Would it have had the same impact? Well, if she had been in a basement, she couldn't be on the top floor, like the third or the fourth story, running around the windows. There were windows surrounding this whole room. Like this room is the only room at the top of the house. And she's running around looking out all the windows, turning in circles, looking around out all the windows. She couldn't do that in a basement. So is setting important? Conflict. What types of conflict are in this story? We've definitely got man versus man. In a sense, we have Jane versus John. And in a sense, we have man versus science, because Jane knows that these prescriptions, because it's rest cure and medications that she's being given, are not what she needs. She knows that. We also have man versus society, because we have a young woman who wants to speak her mind and she's not allowed to. So, types of character, right? Is there irony in the story? Talk about the point of view. The point of view is beautiful, right? Here we have it set up like it's a journal entry log. Like, this is her diary, and she's writing in it every chance she gets. So we are straight up getting the thoughts of the main character through the whole piece. First person journaling. Love that method. You could talk about symbolism with the bed being nailed down or other, well, obviously the woman behind the wallpaper. There's lots of fun literary devices here. You could use personification because that wallpaper's alive. Rhetorical elements, logos, pathos, and ethos. I want to show you. Let me get this book out. This is the textbook that I used to use for Comp 2, but I don't anymore. I even remember what page the yellow wallpaper is on in here. It's like 234. Yeah. I want to show you what it looks like when I read. See all that? I marked logos, I marked pathos, logos, ethos. Oh, this is the page where it says, John says if I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Weir Mitchell in the fall. She's a beast. All right, now, if you see the green highlighting, that's interesting because I started highlighting in green every statement she makes that makes me feel like, oh, she's starting to lose it. Pathos. I even wrote, uh-oh. Pathos, logos, pathos, pathos. Oh, my word, eek, it says. Oh, we've got more green. More green. Yep, she's getting a little crazier. Then we've got even more green, right? More green. That's the end of the story. Yeah, she just like loses her little ever-loving mind, doesn't she? I got out in spite of you and Jane. Oh, but here I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulder just fits in that long smooch around the wall, so I cannot lose my way. I love this story. Absolutely love this story. So, logos, pathos, and ethos all throughout this story. Ethos, every instance of John telling her he's a doctor. Or when she talks about her brother, he's a doctor like John, right? Or him saying, I'm going to take you to Weir Mitchell in the fall. These are instances of pathos within the piece. We see a lot of logos toward the beginning where Jane is straight up saying in her journal, she's saying, this is not what's going to help me. Like, I know I need to be out doing something. I need to go visit people. She's using logic. She's using common sense. But he comes in with his ethos and he's like, no, 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 no. You think you know what you need. You don't know what you need. Bless your little heart. Right? Very patronizing. And then, do you believe the author was effective in his or her message? And how does the story impact you? So, those are the questions, of course, that you will be answering. But let's take a look here at Charlotte's life. This is Charlotte here on your left. So, I'm not going to read everything because there's a lot of information here, much that you will be interested to know about Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who was born in 1860. Okay. Now look at her parents' names. Frederick Beecher Stetson. No, Perkins, sorry. Frederick Beecher Perkins and Mary Fitch Westcott. Now, that Beecher part, does that ring a bell with any other author you may have ever heard of in history? It should, such as Harriet Beecher Stowe. Same family. How crazy is that? Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. But here we have Charlotte Perkins Gilman, same family, through her father's line. We'll see that a little bit more in a bit. All right. Here's a notable quote from Charlotte at the bottom. It is not that women are really smaller minded, weaker minded, more timid and vacillating, but that whosoever, man or woman, lives always in a small, dark place, is always guarded, protected, directed, and restrained, will become inevitably narrowed and weakened by it. Just very strong thoughts and opinions. She was married twice. And this is very interesting. You notice here, she was born in 1860. She did not marry until 1884, which made her 24 at the age of marriage. She did not want to get married. It was not her idea, but she succumbed to society's expectations. Let's see here. All of this is important. That's why I've included it. Let's look at the second paragraph. When Gilman was still a small child, her father abandoned his wife and children, leaving them essentially destitute. Mary Perkins did her best to support her family, but she was unable to provide on her own. As a result, get this, as a result, they spent a great deal of time with her father's aunts, who included education activist Catherine Beecher, suffragist Isabella Beecher Hooker, and most notably, Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. So Charlotte grew up with Catherine Beecher, Isabella Beecher Hooker, and Harriet Beecher Stowe as her great aunts, and they helped raise her. Is it any wonder that she might grow up with some very strong feminist ideals? Kind of fascinating. So we've got another instance here where a broken family has occurred. All right. She was largely isolated during her childhood. She did read a lot during her childhood. Now, a little bit from her aunts. So Catherine Beecher said she was an education activist. She is quoted as having said, "If all females were not only well educated themselves, but were prepared to communicate in an easy manner their stories of knowledge to others, if they not only knew how to regulate their own minds, tempers, and habits, but how to effect improvements in those around them, the face of society would be speedily changed." She's saying, if women could just be educated, educate yourself. Educate yourself, regulate your own mind, your own temper, meaning your personality. You're quick to anger, quick to be kind, your temperament, and your habits. Regulate those things, educate yourself, and the face of society will change. Great quote. And here's Harriet Beecher Stowe. "I feel now that the time has come when even a woman or a child who can speak a word for freedom and humanity is bound to speak. I hope every woman who can write will not be silent." Do you think Harriet had influence on Charlotte? I think it's amazing. Maybe I'm the only one watching this that thinks this is amazing, but I feel like it's amazing. What an incredible trio of strong aunts to have, these amazing women who were far ahead of their time in their thinking, who were put down, ridiculed, but at the same time grew to have very strong voices in this pre-women's movement era. Now, Isabella Beecher Hooker. "I have been impressed more and more with the close likeness to the divine nature which woman seems to bear." Very, very nice. And so there are the aunts to the right again. More pictures of them. Absolutely incredible that these are women who directly influenced the education and the growth of Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So, despite her natural and boundless curiosity, or perhaps especially because of it, Gilman was often a source of frustration to her teachers because she was a rather poor student, meaning she didn't behave the way they wanted her to. She was, however, particularly interested in the study of physics, even more so than history or literature. At the age of 18, in 1878, she enrolled herself at the Rhode Island School of Design, supported financially by her father, who had resumed contact enough to help out with finances, but not enough to truly be a presence in her life. With this education, Gilman was able to carve out a career for herself as an artist for trade cards, which were ornate precursors to the modern business card, advertising for businesses and directing clients to their stores. She also worked as a tutor and an artist. So, very independent spirited woman. Before this fella came along, there is writing that you can find. You can find information on Charlotte that would lead one to believe that in her late teens, early 20s, she was not interested in having a relationship with a man, much less any man, that she had very close female relationships. So that might be of interest to some of you. But then in 1884, because society wanted it to happen, Charlotte married Charles Walter Stetson, a fellow artist, and this is Charles here on the left. At first, she rejected his proposal, having had a deep-seated feeling that the marriage would not be a good choice for her. However, she did accept his proposal eventually. Their only child, a daughter named Catherine, was born in March of 1885. Becoming a mother had a profound impact on Gilman, but not in the way society expected. Now, ready? Listen, here we go. Key. She was already prone to depression, and after giving birth, she suffered from severe postpartum depression, although it did not have that name at that time. So we have Charlotte, who has a child that she really wasn't into even having in the first place. Having Catherine sends her into depression, and she suffers this severe bout of what we now know as postpartum depression for a lengthy period of time. At the time, the medical profession was not equipped to deal with such complaints. Indeed, in an era where women were considered hysterical beings by their very nature, their health problems were often dismissed as mere nerves or overexertion. And so here we have Charlotte, who is struggling with this deep, dark depression after the birth of Catherine. And what happens? Well, let's read this next paragraph. We have to read this. There she is with Charles again. This is precisely what happened to Gilman, and it would become a formative influence on her writing and her activism. By 1887, Gilman wrote in her journals about such intense suffering that she was unable to even care for herself. Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell, does that name sound familiar? Was summoned to help, and he prescribed a rest cure, which essentially required that Charlotte give up all creative pursuit, always keep her daughter with her, avoid any activities that required mental exertions, and live a totally sedentary lifestyle. Instead of curing her, these restrictions prescribed by Miller and enforced by her husband. Now, that shouldn't say Miller, prescribed by Mitchell. That should say Mitchell. And enforced by her husband only made, let's fix that. Here we go. We'll just fix it, right? Only made her depression worse, and she began to have suicidal thoughts. Ultimately, she and her husband decided that a separation was the best solution to allow Gilman to heal without causing more harm to herself, him, or their daughter. They separated in 1888, a rarity and a scandal for the era, and eventually finalized a divorce 6 years later in 1894. Upon moving away in 1888, Gilman's depression began to lift, and she embarked on a steady recovery. So, Gilman marries Charles. They have Catherine. Charlotte falls into a deep depression. Charles says, hey, let's get you to the doctor. He takes her to Silas Weir Mitchell, who is like the renowned helper of mental health issues in that day. He is basically the inventor of this rest cure. And so this is what Charlotte sets about trying to follow. Doesn't work. And then she ends up divorcing Charles. She even allows Charles to take Catherine, and he goes off and remarries after some time. And eventually, Catherine will come back into Charlotte's life. So, this is Silas Ware Mitchell, been called the father of American neurology, and is remembered as a renowned doctor of nervous disease and also a successful author. He is well known for the discovery of the rest cure, which he applied to nervous women. His rest cure, which involved isolating the patient and removing all external stimuli in an attempt to calm her, was largely hailed at the time as a breakthrough in psychological treatment. A breakthrough, y'all. But it has gained a darker reputation since, made infamous by the book, The Yellow Wallpaper, a short story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who was a one-time patient of Mitchell. It is now seen as questionable, if not downright abusive. Made infamous by Charlotte's words. Everyone knew about it. There's Charlotte and Catherine when Catherine was a little bit older. So here it says, after leaving her husband, Gilman made some major personal and professional changes. During that first year of separation, she met Adeline Dell Knapp, who became her close friend and companion. The relationship was most likely romantic, with Gilman believing that she could perhaps have a successful lifelong relationship with a woman rather than her failed marriage to a man. The relationship ended, and she moved, along with her daughter, to Pasadena, California, where she became active in several feminist and reformist organizations. After starting to support herself and Catherine as a door-to-door soap salesman, she eventually became an editor for the Bulletin, a journal put out by one of her organizations. So she set about being a writer as her career. And there's more information here about the Yellow Wallpaper. Okay, well, let's read this. This is fun. The Yellow Wallpaper depicts a woman's struggle with mental illness and obsession with a room's ugly wallpaper after she has been confined to her room for 3 months by her health, or for her health on her husband's orders. The story is quite obviously inspired by Gilman's own experience with being prescribed a rest cure, which was exactly the opposite of what she, as her story's protagonist, needed. Gilman sent a copy. Are you ready for this? This is what a beast this woman is. Gilman sent a copy of the published story to Dr. Mitchell, who had prescribed the rest cure to her. Not only did she write a story about the ludicrousness of this rest cure, but she sent him a copy. Oh, that's funny. She was a writer. She continued to write. She went around speaking for women's rights. Here she is in one of those scenes. More about her career. You can pause and read these if you so choose. A little bit later in her life, let's read this. This is interesting. During this period, so this is a little further along. During this period, Gilman revived her own romantic life as well. In 1893, she had contacted her cousin Houghton Gilman, a Wall Street attorney, and they began a correspondence. In time, they fell in love, and they began spending time together whenever her schedule permitted it. They married in 1900, in what was a much more positive marital experience for Gilman than her first marriage, and they lived in New York City until 1922. So this is Charlotte and Houghton Gilman, I'm not sure exactly how to say his first name. They're play acting for the camera in 1920. I love that picture. I think that's so cool. In January 1932, Gilman was diagnosed with breast cancer. Her prognosis was terminal, but she lived for another 3 years. Even prior to her diagnosis, Gilman had advocated for the option of euthanasia for the terminally ill, which she put into action in her own end-of-life plans. She left a note behind saying that she chose chloroform over cancer, and on August 17, 1935, she quietly ended her own life with an overdose of chloroform. So that's not exactly a happy ending to Charlotte's life. Here's one of her quotes. "The labor of women in the house certainly enables men to produce more wealth than they otherwise could, and in this way, women are economic factors in society. But so are horses." Pretty bold woman. So back to the questions. We got that. What are 3 things about the author's life? Oh, she suffered from mental disorders. She had severe postpartum depression. She was raised by strong feminist women. She's an activist, a social activist. She sent the story to Silas Weir Mitchell himself. She had the rest cure applied to her. She lived this. She knew what it was like. This is her telling the story. Now, let's get to the most important piece here. In Charlotte's words, why I wrote the yellow wallpaper. All right. She actually wrote this piece called Why I Wrote the Yellow Wallpaper. So let's read a portion of it here. It says, "Many and many a reader has asked that. When the story first came out in the New England Magazine about 1891, a Boston physician made protest in the transcript. Such a story ought not to be written, he said. It was enough to drive anyone mad to read it. Another physician in Kansas, I think, wrote to say that it was the best description of incipient insanity he had ever seen, and begging my pardon, had I been there." Now, the story of the story is this. For many years, I suffered from a severe and continuous nervous breakdown, tending to melancholia and beyond. During about the 3rd year of this trouble, I went in devout faith and some faint stir of hope to a noted specialist in nervous diseases, the best known in the country. This wise man put me to bed and applied the rest cure, to which a still good physique responded so promptly that he concluded there was nothing much the matter with me, and sent me home with solemn advice to live as domestic a life as far as possible, to have but 2 hours intellectual life a day, and never to touch pen, brush, or pencil again as long as I lived. This was in 1887. I went home and obeyed those directions for some 3 months, and came so near the border of utter mental ruin that I could see over. Then, using the remnants of intelligence that remained, and helped by a wise friend, I cast the noted specialist's advice to the wind and went to work again. Work, the normal life of every human being. Work, in which is joy and growth and service, without which one is a pauper and a parasite, ultimately recovering some measure of power. Charlotte's words. Being naturally moved to rejoicing by this narrow escape, I wrote the yellow wallpaper with its embellishments and additions to carry out the ideal. I never had hallucinations or objections to my mural decorations, and sent a copy to the physician who so nearly drove me mad. He never acknowledged it. The little book is valued by alienists as a good specimen of one kind of literature. It has, to my knowledge, saved one woman from a similar fate, so terrifying her family that they let her out into normal activity and she recovered. But the best result is this. Many years later, I was told that the great specialist had admitted to friends of his that he had altered his treatment of neurasthenia since reading the yellow wallpaper. It was not intended to drive people crazy, but to save people from being driven crazy. And it worked. What's the author's intended meaning? It's right here on this page. It was not intended to drive people crazy, but to save people from being driven crazy. And it worked. She knew for a fact that it saved one woman's life, and that to her was everything. She also found out that Silas Weir Mitchell changed the way he helped women. He never told her that himself directly, but he did alter his treatments as a result of reading this. Now let's go back. How do we keep from going crazy? How do we do that when we are dealing with a psychological problem, illness? Well, according to Charlotte, that's right here. Casting the noted specialist's advice to the wind, she went to work. And she says, work. The normal life of every human being, work, in which is joy and growth and service. Without which, one is a pauper and a parasite. She said, going to work helped me recover my power. I got out and I did things for others. Joy, growth, service in work. There it is again. Beautiful. Thank you, Charlotte. On the right here, her quote, the first duty of a human being is to assume the right functional relationship to society. More briefly, find your real job and do it. What is it that you're really supposed to be doing? What is it that you love to do? Pursue that. Good stuff. Thank you, Charlotte. All right. So that's the end of what I wanted to share with you regarding Charlotte Perkins Gilman and her story, The Yellow Wallpaper. I challenge you to read The Yellow Wallpaper again now, knowing all of these different things about Charlotte and her life, knowing that she suffered from the rest cure herself. And so all of these internal thoughts that this main character, Jane, has, you know, these are coming directly out of Charlotte's own experience. It changes the story for you. It puts you in it. It makes it extremely personal. You know her real life story. Then you read that. It almost hurts. Because she knew what that felt like. And she wanted to save other women from that same fate. Amazing motivation for writing. So we move forward. Switch gears if you want to pause now and wait a couple of days before you dig into the ones who walk away from Omelas. That's perfectly fine. Just remember what slide you need to come back to. This is the beginning of the next section. For me, though, I'm just going to keep on jumping through. So where you see that page 767, that's this big old honking book right here, which is not your textbook. So let's take that off of there. How about we do that? We'll just take that off. You have PDF is on board. There we go. We'll just do that. All right. You have a PDF available. Probably a really good idea. Pause the video right now, get that out, open it up so you can follow along as the story unfolds. So in my book, though, I do love this book. 787. Oh, that's not what it was. What page was it? Here, that's funny. I thought I remembered the numbers. It's not 787, and I don't need to find it really because you don't have this book. There it is. 767. Okay, let's move forward. Got an audiobook here? Oh, no. See if it's on the next slide, too. Nope, it's not. All right, well, you know what? I'll read it. I'll read it. How about that? It's not a real long one, so I'll read this. It looks like I was thinking, or I was looking back through all of those video lectures that I've made, and it seems like I've read one a week. So this is appropriate. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. With a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, the festival of summer came to the city Omelas, bright towered by the sea. The rigging of the boats in harbor sparkled with flags. In the streets between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss-grown gardens and under avenues of trees, past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. Some were decorous, old people in long stiff robes of mauve and gray, grave master workmen, quiet, merry women, carrying their babies and chatting as they walked. In other streets, the music beat faster, a shimmering of gong and tambourine, and the people went dancing. The procession was a dance. Children dodged in and out, their high calls rising like the swallows crossing flights over the music and the singing. All the processions wound toward the north side of the city, where on the great green water meadow, or the great water meadow called the green fields, boys and girls, naked in the bright air, with mud-stained feet and ankles and long, lithe arms, exercised their restive horses before the race. The horses wore no gear at all, but a halter without bit. Their manes were braided with streamers of silver, gold, and green. They flared their nostrils and pranced and boasted to one another. They were vastly excited, the horse being the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own. Far off to the north and west, the mountain stood up half encircling Omelas on her bay. The air of morning was so clear that the snow still crowning the 18 peaks burned with white gold fire across the miles of sunlit air, under the dark blue of the sky. There was just enough wind to make the banners that marked the race course snap and flutter now and then. In the silence of the broad green meadows, one could hear the music winding through the city streets, farther and nearer, and ever approaching. A cheerful faint sweetness of the air that from time to time trembled and gathered together and broke out into the great joyous clanging of the bells. Joyous. How is one to tell about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. But we do not say the words of cheer much anymore. All smiles have become archaic. Given a description such as this, one tends to make certain assumptions. Given a description such as this, one tends to look next for the king, mounted on a splendid stallion and surrounded by his noble knights, or perhaps in a golden litter borne by great-muscled slaves. But there was no king. They did not use swords or keep slaves. They were not barbarians. I do not know the rules and laws of their society, but I suspect that they were singularly few. As they did without monarchy and slavery, so they also got on with the stock exchange, the advertisement, the secret police, and the bomb. Yet I repeat that these were not simple folk, not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. They were not less complex than us. The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. If you can't lick 'em, join 'em. If it hurts, repeat it. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. We have almost lost hold. We can no longer describe a happy man nor make any celebration of joy. How can I tell you about the people of Omelas? They were not naive and happy children, though their children were, in fact, happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched. Oh, miracle! But I wish I could describe it better. I wish I could convince you. Omelas sounds in my words like a city in a fairy tale, long ago and far away, once upon a time. Perhaps it would be best if you imagined it as your own fancy bids, assuming it will rise to the occasion, for certainly I cannot suit you all. For instance, how about technology? I think there would be no cars or helicopters in and above the streets. This follows from the fact that the people of Omelas are happy people. Happiness is based on a just discrimination of what is necessary, what is neither necessary nor destructive, and what is destructive. In the middle category, however, that of the unnecessary but undestructive, that of comfort, luxury, exuberance, etc., they could perfectly well have central heating, subway trains, washing machines, and all kinds of marvelous devices not yet invented here, floating light sources, fuelless power, a cure for the common cold. Or they could have none of that. It doesn't matter. As you like it. I incline to think that people from towns up and down the coast have been coming to Omelas during the last days before the festival on very fast little trains and double-deck trams, and that the train stations of Omelas is actually the handsomest building in town, though plainer than the magnificent farmers' market. But even granted trains, I fear that Omelas so far strikes some of you as goody-goody. Smiles, bells, parades, horses, blah! If so, please add an orgy. If an orgy would help, don't hesitate. Let us not, however, have temples from which issue beautiful nudes, priests and priestesses, already half in ecstasy and ready to copulate with any man or woman, lover or stranger who desires union with the deep Godhead of the blood. Although that was my first idea. But really, it would be better not to have any temples in Omelas, at least not manned temples. Religion, yes. Clergy, no. Surely the beautiful nudes can just wander about, offering themselves like divine souffles to the hunger of the needy and the rapture of the flesh. Let them join the processions. Let tambourines be struck above the copulations and the glory of desire be proclaimed upon the gongs. And, a not unimportant point, let the offspring of these delightful rituals be beloved and looked after by all. One thing I know there is none of in Omelas is guilt. What else should there be? I thought at first there were not drugs, but that is puritanical. For those who like it, the fate-insistent sweetness of Druze may perfume the city or the ways of the city, Druze which brings a great lightness and brilliance to the mind and limbs, and then after some hours a dreamy languor, and wonderful visions at last of the very arcana and inmost secrets of the universe, as well as exciting the pleasure of sex beyond belief. And it is not habit-forming. For most modest tastes, I think there ought to be beer. What else? What else belongs in the joyous city? The sense of victory, surely, the celebration of courage. But as we did without clergy, let us do without soldiers. The joy built upon successful slaughter is not the right kind of joy. It will not do. It is fearful and it is trivial. A boundless and generous contentment, a magnanimous triumph felt not against some outer enemy, but in communion with the finest and fairest of the souls of all men everywhere, and the splendor of the world's summer. This is what swells the hearts of the people of Omelas, and the victory they celebrate is that of life. I really don't think many of them need to take Druze. Most of the procession have reached the green fields by now. A marvelous smell of cooking goes forth from the red and blue tents of the provisioners. The faces of small children are amiably sticky, and the benign gray beard of a man, a couple of crumbs of rich pastry are entangled. The youths and girls have mounted their horses and are beginning to group around the starting line of the course. An old woman, small, fat, and laughing, is passing out flowers from a basket, and tall young men wear her flowers in their shining hair. A child of 9 or 10 sits at the edge of the crowd, alone, playing on a wooden flute. People pause to listen, and they smile. But they do not speak to him, for he never ceases playing and never sees them, his dark eyes wholly wrapped in the sweet, thin magic of the tune. He finishes, and slowly lowers his hands holding the wooden flute. As if that little private silence were the signal, all at once a trumpet sounds from the pavilion near the starting line, imperious, melancholy, piercing. The horses rear on their slender legs, and some of them neigh in answer. Sober-faced, the young riders stroke the horses' necks and soothe them, whispering, "Quiet, quiet, there, my beauty, my hope." They begin to form in rank along the starting line. The crowds along the race course are like a field of grass and flowers in the wind. The festival of summer has begun. Do you believe me? Do you accept the festival, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. In a basement under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, secondhand from a cobwebbed window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads stand near a rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is about 3 paces long and 2 wide, a mere broom closet or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but actually is nearly 10. It is feeble-minded. Perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or genitals as it sits hunched in the corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It is afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes, but it knows the mops are still standing there, and the door is locked, and nobody will come. The door is always locked, and nobody ever comes, except that sometimes the child has no understanding of time or interval. Sometimes the door rattles terribly and it opens, and a person or several people are there. One of them may come in and kick the child to make it stand up. The others never come close, but peer at it with frightened, disgusted eyes. The food bowl and the water jug are hastily filled. The door is locked. The eyes disappear. The people at the door never say anything, but the child who has not always lived in the tool room and can remember sunlight and its mother's voice sometimes speaks. "I will be good," it says. "Please let me out. I will be good." They never answer. The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal, but now it can only make a kind of whining, ah, ah, and it speaks less and less often. It is so thin there are no calves to its legs. Its belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. Its buttocks and thighs are a mass of festered sores as it sits in its own excrement continually. They all know it is there, all the people of Omelas. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know that it has to be there. Some of them understand why, and some do not. But they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies, depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. This is usually explained to children when they are between 8 and 12, whenever they seem capable of understanding. And most of those who come to see the child are young people, though even often enough an adult comes or comes back to see the child. No matter how well the matter has been explained to them, these young spectators are always shocked and sickened at the sight. They feel disgust, which they had thought themselves superior to. They feel anger, outrage, impotence, despite all the explanations. They would like to do something for the child, but there is nothing they can do. If the child were brought up into the sunlight out of that vile place, if it were cleaned and fed and comforted, that would be a good thing indeed. But if it were done in that day and hour, all the prosperity and beauty and delight of Omelas would wither and be destroyed. Those are the terms. To exchange all of the goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single, small improvement. To throw away the happiness of thousands for the chance of the happiness of one. That would be to let guilt within the walls indeed. The terms are strict and absolute. There may not even be a kind word spoken to the child. Often the young people go home in tears or in a tearless rage when they have seen the child and faced this terrible paradox. They may brood over it for weeks or years, but as time goes on, they begin to realize that even if the child could be released, it would not get much good of its freedom. A little vague pleasure of warmth and food, no doubt, but little more. It is too degraded and imbecile to know any real joy. It has been afraid too long ever to be free of fear. Its habits are too uncouth for it to respond to humane treatment. Indeed, after so long, it would probably be wretched without walls about it to protect it, and darkness for its eyes, and its own excrement to sit in. Their tears at the bitter injustice dry when they begin to perceive the terrible justice of reality, and to accept it. Yet it is their tears and anger, the trying of their generosity and the acceptance of their helplessness, which are perhaps the true source of the splendor of their lives. Theirs is no vapid, irresponsible happiness. They know that they, like the child, are not free. They know compassion. It is the existence of the child and their knowledge of its existence that makes possible the nobility of their architecture, the poignancy of their music, the profundity of their science. It is because of the child that they are so gentle with children. They know that if the wretched one were not there sniveling in the dark, the other one, the flute player, could make no joyful music as the young riders line up in their beauty for the race in the sunlight of the first morning of summer. Now, do you believe in them? Are they not more credible? But there is one more thing to tell, and this is quite incredible. At times, one of the adolescent girls or boys who go to see the child does not go home to weep or rage, does not, in fact, go home at all. Sometimes, also a man or a woman much older falls silent for a day or two, and then leaves home. These people go out into the street and walk down the streets alone. They keep walking and walk straight out of the city of Omelas, through the beautiful gates. They keep walking across the farmlands of Omelas. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Night falls. The traveler must pass down the village streets between the houses with yellow lit windows and on out into the darkness of the fields. Each alone, they go west or north toward the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist, but they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. That brings us to the end of that story. Thoughts and questions? What do you think the author thought you already knew? What is the historical situational context of the story? 3 things about the author's life. The author's intended meaning, literary elements, rhetorical elements. Do you believe the author was effective in his or her message? And how does the story impact you? What about the story has confirmed, changed, or challenged what you already know? And how do you move forward from here? So those are the questions that you're going to come across in the discussion. They might be worded just a bit differently, but those are the questions. So let's take a look here at Ursula's life, just a little bit. Don't have quite as much as I did for Charlotte. Ursula was born in 1929 and grew up in Berkeley, California. Her parents were anthropologist Alfred Kroeber and writer Theodora Kroeber, author of Ishi. She, Ursula, there is an example of a pronoun that's not clear. Because in this instance, she could be talking about Theodora as well. Right? Absolutely, it could. That is an unclear pronoun. Just pointing that out. Ursula attended Radcliffe College and did graduate work at Columbia University. She married historian Charles A. Le Guin in Paris in 1953. They lived in Portland, Oregon, beginning in 1958, and had 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Le Guin died peacefully in her home in January of 2018. Most of the information here I took from her website. There's some information from other places as well. So her parents were anthropologists as well as writers. All right. So Ursula is raised in a home where culture was studied. She was encouraged to read, she and her three brothers. She had three older brothers, and so they were all encouraged to read, to study. It says Le Guin grew up the youngest and the only girl of four formidably well-read and intellectually agile children. Her father, in particular, was a storyteller who liked to tell tales around the campfire on summer nights. And so theirs was a very learning-centered, book-centered home growing up, people-centered, culture-centered. This is her father and an Indian fellow that a Yahi tribesman that he befriended, and that Ursula's mother actually wrote a book about. Some more information here about Ursula. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but it is there for you to study. You need to know about her. Let's see, I underlined this portion, so let's read through it. Curry makes it look like Le Guin rescued science fiction and fantasy more or less single-handedly from a state of literary neglect, which isn't exactly true. There were other writers who saw the genre's potential for yielding, enduring literature, but Le Guin chose this despised, marginal genre, she once said, for a reason she couldn't acknowledge to herself at the time, because it was excluded from critical, academic, canonical supervision, leaving the artist free. So what she's talking about there is Le Guin's genre of choice was science fiction. Almost unheard of for a woman to be writing in science fiction, right? And she enjoyed science fiction because it pretty much stayed out of the literary critic realm. So she could write with freedom. She could write with abandon. She could write about whatever she wanted to without somebody getting a hold of it and trying to, shame her or cancel her in any kind of way. So she was just able to unabashedly write what she wanted to write. So she really enjoyed the freedom that the science fiction genre and the fantasy genre gave to her. And so here's more information about awards and writing in science fiction about Ursula. Now, here's some very important information for you when you're considering, why did she write this story? Cultural anthropology, Taoism, feminism, and the writings of Carl Jung all had a strong influence on Le Guin's work. Many of her stories used anthropologists or cultural observers as protagonists, and Taoist ideas about balance and equilibrium have been identified in several writings. Le Guin often subverted typical speculative fiction tropes, such as through her use of dark-skinned protagonist in Earthsea, and also used unusual stylistic or structural devices in books such as the experimental work Always Coming Home. Social and political themes, including race, gender, sexuality, and coming of age, were prominent in her writing. She explored alternative political structures in many stories, such as in the philosophical short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and the anarchist utopian novel, The Dispossessed. So you can see here, her writing's a little bit different, right? From Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Kate Chopin, any of the writers of this day, even we could throw in Richard Connell and her contemporaries and Ray Bradbury. Her writing's a lot different. It's based in a lot of anthropological study, cultural observations, Taoist ideas about balance and equilibrium. Let's see, she also used a lot of unusual stylistic structural devices. I mean, think about The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, right? You've got an observer as your storyteller, the narrator. And when you're going through that first half of the story, sometimes the pronouns are they, and sometimes the pronouns are we. There are times when the narrator includes herself in the story, and there are other times when the narrator distances herself from the story. You notice that? Did you notice that? Read that again. Up through that whole everything's happy, happy, joy, joy, that whole section. Sometimes the narrator says we and us, and sometimes the narrator's like they, them, what they do. That was a stylistic choice. And then the narrator, too, to the reader is going, now do you believe me? Do you believe me now? That was also a stylistic choice. These are unique, different things that Ursula would do. This think outside the box, present the story in a way that makes the reader, what is happening here? But at the end, stays with you, makes you think. Social, political themes throughout her writing, in all of her science fiction. Alternative political structures. Perhaps inside of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, we have a political commentary. Perhaps. So those words, cultural anthropology, Taoism, and feminism, I wanted to give you definitions of. So cultural anthropology, what is that? What is it that she was raised with? What were her parents all about? What was it that Ursula herself became interested in because it's what she was raised with? It's a branch of anthropology focused on the study of cultural variation among humans. Anthropologists have pointed out that through culture, people can adapt to their environment in non-genetic ways. So people living in different environments will often have different cultures. Much of anthropological theory has originated in an appreciation of and interest in the tension between the local, particular cultures, and the global, a universal human nature, or the web of connections between people in distinctive places and circumstances. So an anthropologist is studying, why do cultures exist? How do cultures form? How can there be different cultures within one city? What causes that culture? Right. So it's very interesting to dig into the study of these groups of people. Psychology is the study of one person, of you, the mind. Sociology is the study of groups and how groups interact with one another. Anthropology is another science or a psychological field, but it is the study of culture. Fascinating, fascinating. Taoism or Taoism refers to a set of Chinese traditions and religions which emphasize living in harmony with the Tao. The Tao is generally defined as the source of everything and the ultimate principle underlying reality. So this was a concept that Ursula was interested in, the concept of balance. Can we achieve balance? And that's a theme that you'll see in The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas if you look for it. Right? I'm getting ahead of myself here, but does happiness exist without sadness? Can we know what happiness is if there is no sadness? Can we know what good is without bad? Balance. Anarchism. Having trouble saying that word right now, but I know what it is. This is one of the political themes that you will find in Ursula's writings. Anarchism is a belief that society should have no government, laws, police, or any other authority. Having that belief is perfectly legal, and the majority of anarchists in the US advocate change through nonviolent, non-criminal means. As a historically left-wing movement, this reading of anarchism is placed on the farthest left of the political spectrum, usually described as the libertarian wing of the socialist movement. Some anarchist traditions are inclined to dismiss moral philosophy as merely another dominating ideology, but many of these writers see ethics as an important foundation of anarchist projects and moral theory necessary for finding a way out of state and capitalist society. So you're going to find, because again, Ursula very interested in studying culture, and within that, the political frameworks that work inside of or because of those differing cultures. And this idea of anarchism, to have no government, no laws. You see this in the ones who walk away from Omelas. This society, there's no king, there's no clergy, there's no soldiers. They're happy. Do you believe me? Perhaps the story has a flair of sarcasm to it. Now, here's this idea of utilitarianism, and this is another idea that Ursula contemplated and wrote about. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that determines right from wrong by focusing on outcomes. It is a form of consequentialism. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. It is the only moral framework that can be used to justify military force or war. It is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in business because of the way in which it accounts for cost and benefits. However, because we cannot predict the future, it's difficult to know with certainty whether the consequences of our actions will be good or bad. This is one of the limitations of utilitarianism. So utilitarianism here is an idea that's straight up inside the framework of the ones who walk away from Omelas. All of the happiness of this city, right? Now, I'm not sure about you, but read that again. Read the whole story again. Is this truly a happy city? Well, they say they are. It's about the greater good, right? If they let that kid out of the basement, then all their happiness goes away. So it's okay for one to suffer, for the rest of us to be happy, even if we're not completely happy. I mean, some of us walk away and never return. But it helps us, right? We can appreciate the flute player. We can love the flute player because we know that that one is their suffering. So it gives us more compassion for the people who are out here. We love and appreciate each other more. We understand that that one has to be there, right? That one has to be there, or all of this goes away. If you let it out, it wouldn't be able to do anything anyway. It's too degraded ever to understand happiness. It's too stupid to ever be able to have a conversation. Are you kidding me? Utilitarianism. I love this. Read this part again here, this middle paragraph. It is the only moral framework that can be used to justify military force or war, the greater good. It is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in business, the greater good. I think hard times are coming when we will be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies. We will need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, the realists of a larger reality. That is a quote from Ursula. I've got that in dark ink there. I need to make it brighter. I think hard times are coming when we will be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies. We will need writers who can remember freedom. Freedom was Le Guin's artistic and personal watchword. She searched for it in the realm of the imagination and invited her readers to travel toward freedom with her. She wanted her readers to think. Traveling to an unfamiliar place often has ethical implications in Le Guin's fiction, most notably in one of her best-known works, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. This brief parable begins by introducing an imaginary city. Then the narrator turns to you, the reader, and asks you to fill in the details you might need to make the city of Omelas your personal utopia, a place of boundless and generous contentment. As the writer Neil Gaiman describes it, you are part of this. You are creating this with her, and you experience for several pages this wonderful city of noble people, the city of cities, Omelas. And then she says, there's one more thing. The catch is that readers are asked to picture a neglected, starved, wretched child. Then they learn that the beauty and joy of Omelas depends unconditionally on the misery of the one. It sets out and it says, this is a thought experiment. And then it goes in and it breaks your heart. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is a 1973 work of short philosophical fiction by American writer Ursula K. Le Guin. With deliberately both vague and vivid descriptions, the narrator depicts a summer festival in the utopian city of Omelas, whose prosperity depends on the perpetual misery of a single child. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas was nominated for the Locus Award for Best Short Fiction in 1974 and won the Hugo Award for Best Short Story in 1974. Now here we go. This is crux of the matter information. The central idea of this psychomyth, the scapegoat, writes Le Guin, turns up in Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, and several people have asked me, rather suspiciously, why I gave credit to William James. The fact is, I haven't been able to reread Dostoevsky much as I loved him since I was 25. And I'd simply forgotten he had used the idea. But then I met it in James, the moral philosopher, and the moral life. It was a shock of reject. Oh my goodness, let me read that again. But when I met it in James as the moral philosopher and the moral life, it was with a shock of recognition. The quote from William James is this: or if the hypothesis were offered us of a world in which Messieurs Fourier's and Bellamy's and Morris's utopias should all be outdone, and millions kept permanently happy on the one simple condition that a certain lost soul on the far-off edge of things should lead a life of lonely torture, what except a skeptical and independent sort of emotion can it be which would make us immediately feel, even though an impulse arose within us to clutch at the happiness so offered, how hideous a thing would be its enjoyment when deliberately accepted as the fruit of such a bargain. Dostoevsky's original description of the dilemma refers to the doctrine of salvation through the crucifixion of Jesus, the suffering of one for the good of all, or the good of most. Utilitarianism. Now, does Ursula tell us where she falls on the issue? No. She does not. Let's read this. Look at that look on her face. She knows I'm about to read these words. Though Omelas is, in a sense, barely fiction at all, it is characteristic of Le Guin's work in at least one respect. It challenges the reader to think beyond the ending. Those residents of Omelas who cannot accept the condition of their happiness must walk away and never return. They can't accept it. Where do they go? Omelas is often taught in high schools because of its power to provoke discussion around this question, and students are often frustrated with this problem with no solution. Le Guin tells Curry, my job is not to arrive at a final answer and just deliver it. I see my job as holding doors open or opening windows. But who comes in and out the doors? What you see out the window? How do I know? That brings us to the end of our Omelas section. If we were in the classroom together, we would take this one step further and talk about instances in our lives, current realities, that are Omelas type situations. And at first, your initial reaction is you want to say, well, there aren't any. Oh, yes, there are. And when you start thinking about it, it's going to be overwhelming. And then the question becomes, well, what can I do? Are you a citizen of Omelas who stays? Or are you a citizen of Omelas who walks away? Or are you a citizen of Omelas who says, fish this, and goes in and rescues that child? Who are you? If we were in the classroom, we would end up talking about this. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time right here. I am just letting you know that I have some statistical data at the end. You can look this information up for yourselves. This is just the tip of the iceberg with information about trafficking. When you dig in even deeper, you find out statistics like once a child has been placed into trafficking, their lifespan expectation is about 7 years. Children that are put into sex trafficking can be, was it over that span of time, they'll be raped somewhere around 6,000 times. That's what I remember reading. It's shocking. It's also interesting that if you go on the websites of companies or organizations who are helping people to escape from sex trafficking, you'll find much different statistical data than you'll find on government sites because the government doesn't report actual numbers. I mean, they report the numbers that they want us to know. They don't want us to understand that trafficking has just eclipsed the drug trade as far as the most profitable business in the world. It's quite disturbing. You can look that information up and find it for yourself, but talk about suffering children. So I'm not going to stick on that. I am going to bring us back over here, though. That lasted a little bit longer than I intended it to, this whole video today. But these last two stories, man, they're powerful. They are very powerful. And so I keep them to the end on purpose. So I hope you've enjoyed them, and I hope they've given you some food for thought. Get ready. We're going to talk about rhetorical analysis next week, and we're going to be getting started on that rhetorical analysis essay. So, woohoo! I am excited. I'll be looking forward to seeing which of these stories that you choose to write about. Which of these stories has had the biggest impact on you? Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. Like, this is what you're going to be writing about. Which of these stories or which of these authors do you think did the best job using logos, pathos, and ethos to get the message across? Okay, that's where we're headed. But first, we're going to talk about rhetorical analysis next week. So, very good. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm going to say ta-ta for now.